At the lavish Astoria Grand Hotel, one of the city's most extravagant ballrooms glittered under massive crystal chandeliers, each facet reflecting the rising tension in the air. In the middle of it all stood Adrian Walsh, a self-made millionaire in a tailored tuxedo, arrogantly presenting his stunning mistress to the city's most influential guests. Gasps rippled through the crowd at this shameless display, and whispers buzzed behind manicured hands. Then, suddenly, the double doors swung open. A hush fell as a very pregnant young woman stepped inside, Adrian's wife, Lila Walsh. But that wasn't the only shock. Beside her stood the notoriously private Billionaire CEO, Marcus Bennett, whose protective posture made it clear he would stand between Lila and any threat tonight. The scandal was about to explode, and not a soul in that ballroom would escape unscathed. The Astoria Grand was famous for its sprawling marble floors polished to a mirror shine, and the air was fragrant with exotic blooms flown in straight from Florence. Hundreds of high-society guests, draped in designer gowns and crisp suits, mingled over murmurs of hedge funds, super yachts, and next quarter's mergers. This was the annual Tomorrow's Promise Gala, a must-attend fundraiser for the city's privileged circle, renowned for collecting millions in donations for disadvantaged children's education. Adrian Walsh, the host everyone had come to see, commanded attention with his tall frame and magnetic presence. Years ago, he was just another middle manager at Embertech, but ruthless ambition, and what some whispered was pure opportunism, pushed him to the top. He'd bought out a struggling app firm for a fraction of its worth and turned it into a digital empire. By 36, Adrian's fortune had soared into 9 digits. Yet despite the polish, an unmistakable arrogance clung to him tonight, amplified by the grand backdrop of live violins and shimmering chandeliers. He strolled onto the stage with a breathtaking brunette on his arm, Juliet Rivers. Rumors about her had circulated for ages. Some said she was the new PR director. Others insisted she was an elusive heiress from Paris. The truth, revealed in the sly glint of Adrian's eyes, was far more scandalous. Juliet's crimson silk gown clung to her every curve, drawing scandalized whispers from the sea of diamonds and champagne flutes. It was a blatant provocation, considering everyone knew Adrian already had a wife. And yet, Lila Walsh was nowhere to be seen. Until now. Adrian tapped the microphone, his voice carrying smoothly over the quiet hum of polite chatter. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here at the Tomorrow's Promise Gala. We have an extraordinary night ahead, and an announcement later you won't want to miss. Polite applause and murmurs of curiosity swept through the ballroom. He gestured for Juliet to take his arm, guiding her gracefully down the steps. Instantly, they were surrounded by the city's most powerful figures. One of them, Robert Grant, CEO of Grant Holdings, clapped Adrian firmly on the shoulder and shot an amused look at Juliet. "Well, you certainly don't waste any time," Robert joked under his breath, just loud enough for nearby guests to catch. Adrian only smirked. He thrived on whispers and envy, even if his behavior danced dangerously close to scandal. What he didn't know was that his carefully crafted spectacle was moments away from unraveling in ways he never dreamed possible. At that very moment, his wife, Lila Walsh, 6 months pregnant, was already on her way, escorted by none other than Marcus Bennett, the enigmatic billionaire CEO known for secretive philanthropic deals. Adrian thought he was the master of tonight's show, but fate and karma were about to hijack the script entirely. A few hours before the gala, Lila had sat alone in the sun-drenched sitting room of their sprawling estate at the edge of the city, a palatial symbol of Adrian's meteoric rise. Soaring columns, a winding drive, manicured gardens, everything was immaculate, except the cracks that now split her once perfect marriage. 6 months pregnant, she found no comfort in the airy rooms anymore. Every polished surface felt cold under her fingertips. Each ornate window reflected a life that looked flawless from the outside, but felt like a fragile glass cage on the inside. She'd felt Adrian drifting for months. The man who used to rub her swollen feet and surprise her with late-night ice cream now barely shared a bed with her. He was always out, endless dinners, mysterious meetings that stretched till dawn. Lila told herself it was just the price of his ambition. But deep down, the signs were impossible to ignore. Sometimes at night she would lie awake, one hand resting on her belly, wondering if this child would grow up witnessing the same silences and half-truths that now poisoned their marriage. She had planned to skip the Tomorrow's Promise Gala entirely. Her body was tired, her emotions raw, and pregnancy only made every feeling sharper. But then the phone rang. Natalie Harris, one of her oldest friends and a trusted legal counsel at Adrian's firm, spoke in a hushed, trembling voice. "Lila, I don't want to scare you, but you have to come tonight. Adrian, he's bringing someone he's been seeing." Lila's pulse thundered in her ears. Her hand flew protectively to her belly as she absorbed Natalie's fear-laced warning. She had suspected infidelity, but seeing it flaunted in public? The humiliation was almost too much to bear. A quiet sob caught in her throat but never escaped. She pressed her palm harder against her stomach, as if to shield her baby from the storm raging inside her. A wave of anger, betrayal, and disbelief churned inside her. Anger, hurt, and betrayal surged through her. Lila ended the call without saying a word, tears stinging her eyes. For nearly an hour, she stood frozen by the wide window of her luxurious living room. Outside, the setting sun painted a soft golden glow over the rose bushes Adrian once planted for her as a symbol of his love. How painfully things had changed. She pressed her clenched fist against the glass, the sting of his betrayal burning hotter than any sunset. 1,000 memories slammed into her all at once. His whispered promises, quiet laughter by the fire, the way he once kissed her belly and promised he'd protect them both. Now every vow felt like a cruel joke echoing off the marble floors of a house that suddenly felt too big for her broken trust. Just then, her butler, Samuel, cleared his throat discreetly to announce a visitor. Startled, Lila turned, and there he was. Marcus Bennett himself stood in her doorway. His unexpected presence was strangely comforting. Once, Marcus had mentored Adrian and grown close to Lila in those early days. But over the years, Marcus had stepped away from the spotlight, becoming a mystery even among the city's elite. "Lila," he said gently, genuine concern softening his features. "I heard some troubling things about Adrian. I want to help you." She couldn't hold back the tears anymore. "He's flaunting a mistress tonight, in front of everyone. I can't believe he would do this, especially now." Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief, but beneath the tears something solid and defiant flickered back to life. Marcus hesitated, then stepped closer and rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You shouldn't face this alone. If you choose to go tonight, I'll stand with you. You have my full support." Lila swallowed hard, her resolve suddenly clear. She would no longer be the silent wife hiding behind closed doors. If Adrian planned to show off his mistress in front of the entire city, then she would face him head-on, and she would not be alone. Within 2 hours, Lila had changed into a breathtaking midnight blue maternity gown. She paused before the mirror, seeing not just her rounded belly, but the fierce determination in her eyes. Strength coursed through her veins, stronger than any doubt. She whispered to her reflection, barely audible but unshakable, "He will not break me. Not tonight. Not ever again." Moments later, she stepped into Marcus's sleek black Bentley. Together, they drove toward the gala, unaware that their arrival would ignite a scandal that would alter their lives forever. Juliet Rivers, meanwhile, was no stranger to the intoxicating pull of money and influence. Born as Julia Marsh in a working-class neighborhood outside Dublin, she learned young how quickly fortune could slip through desperate fingers. Her father lost his job when she was 12. Her mother battled a chronic illness that drained their savings overnight. Poverty hovered over her childhood like a curse, and Julia vowed she would never be powerless again. By her late teens, she had discovered her sharp mind, keen intuition, and striking beauty could unlock doors once slammed in her family's face. By 20, she was dating wealthy, older men, each affair lifting her social standing a little higher, each lover teaching her the darker arts of secrets, power, and persuasion. Juliet quickly realized that the true currency in the world she craved wasn't just money, it was secrets, and she mastered the art of uncovering them. After a series of well-chosen relationships that always ended with her walking away richer, she set her sights overseas. She mingled at elite parties in Monaco, Hong Kong, and Dubai, collecting contacts and whispers in equal measure. Eventually, she drifted to the United States, first catching the attention of real estate mogul Patrick Sloan in New York, then a shipping magnate in Los Angeles. But these men were just stepping stones. Juliet was hunting for a jackpot, a man whose hunger for status matched her own insatiable ambition. That hunt led her straight to Adrian Walsh at a private investment summit in San Francisco. It wasn't his sharp jawline that hooked her, it was the electric force of his ambition, felt the way he owned every room he walked into. Their affair ignited quietly, stolen conversations at hotel bars, secret rides to overpriced dinners. Adrian was impulsive yet sharp, a dangerous mix that fascinated her. He wasn't just wealthy, he was on the brink of shattering into a whole new stratosphere of power. Juliet saw in him an opening, an equal, and a ladder she planned to climb without looking back. Adrian, growing restless in his spotless marriage, was mesmerized by Juliet's boldness and poise. She could debate global finance one moment and captivate an entire circle of CEOs the next. But Juliet craved more than backroom secrecy. She wanted her own seat at the city's most exclusive tables. She wanted to be seen, admired, feared even. So when Adrian invited her to the Tomorrow's Promise Gala, promising it would be their official debut as the city's next power couple, she didn't hesitate for a second. He didn't bother explaining how he'd spin this stunt while still married to Lila, but Juliet didn't care. She wanted the room's envy. She suspected Adrian would soon sweeten the deal with something far bigger than clandestine nights in penthouses. Standing at Adrian's side on that grand stage, Juliet Rivers savored the hushed gasps, the scandal written across every shocked face. This was exactly the chaos she craved. She planned to wield this night as her launchpad to the highest rungs of society. What she didn't count on was the abrupt arrival of the very woman whose place she intended to steal. Arriving on the arm of one of the few men in the city powerful enough to eclipse Adrian Walsh himself. Long before Adrian donned custom-tailored suits and gave million-dollar grins to business reporters, he was just Adrian Walsh from the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma. The son of two hard-working middle-class parents, Adrian's gift for negotiation showed up early. He was the kid who turned a humble lemonade stand into a neighborhood empire, convincing classmates to invest for a share of his earnings. Scholarships and part-time jobs carried him through college while he polished his raw edge into razor-sharp ambition. Adrian earned his place at a prestigious business school, where his ambition hardened into a razor-sharp focus. He entered every competition, joined every student enterprise club, and built a network with relentless energy. Many classmates admired him, but some whispered he was too ruthless, too willing to cross lines others tiptoed around. After graduation, he landed an entry-level spot at Embertech, a mid-sized software company. His superiors quickly noted his ferocious work ethic and assigned him to projects that demanded tight deadlines and creative solutions. In time, Adrian cultivated a tight circle of mentors. One of the most influential was Marcus Bennett, then a rising venture capitalist. Marcus saw something dangerous yet promising in Adrian and often brought him along to high-stakes negotiations, teaching him the art of reading a room, convincing hesitant investors, and spinning setbacks into advantages. But as Adrian climbed higher, so did his ego. He stopped hearing advice that didn't flatter him. Warnings became noise. At night, he'd stand by his penthouse window and tell himself he was unstoppable, that no rule truly applied to him anymore. A pivotal moment came when he caught wind of a struggling startup focused on machine learning software for retail analytics. While others saw a sinkhole of risk, Adrian saw pure potential. He scraped together funding, some from his own savings, some from small-time backers, and bought the fledgling company for pennies on the dollar. Over the next few years, he transformed it into a powerhouse for consumer behavior insights. Fortune smiled, and so did the market. Contracts rolled in from global retail giants, sending Adrian's net worth into the stratosphere. Lavish parties, extravagant vacations, and luxury real estate soon followed. So did Lila. They met when she worked as an HR consultant at an exclusive conference where Adrian was the star speaker. Her warmth and genuine kindness cut straight through the armor of his ambition. They fell hard and fast. Even Marcus Bennett, who had grown wary of Adrian's cutthroat tendencies, was quietly relieved to see Lila soften him. For a while, Adrian seemed truly happy. Their wedding was a society spectacle, elegant, exclusive, and splashed across every glossy magazine. But success never stopped whispering in Adrian's ear. He dove even deeper into expansions, brokered deals in Asia and the Middle East, and almost never made it home before midnight. Some nights, he'd glance at Lila asleep in their bed and feel a fleeting stab of guilt. But ambition always swallowed it whole by morning. Gradually, the tenderness he once lavished on Lila faded. Her gentle reminders to balance work and family began to feel like a leash to him, something holding him back from his next conquest. Then came Juliet Rivers. Her cold-blooded ambition matched his own, and their affair became a thrilling escape from the domestic life he now viewed as suffocating. So at the Tomorrow's Promise Gala, Adrian was ready to make a statement with Juliet on his arm. Yet behind his calculating eyes, a flicker of the man he used to be still lingered. Hard-working, sincere, and madly in love with the woman he was about to betray so publicly. The only question was whether that last shred of conscience would mean anything once he faced his pregnant wife, escorted by the very mentor he once idolized. Inside Marcus's sleek Bentley, Lila inhaled deeply during the tense drive to the Astoria Grand Hotel, forcing herself to steady her breathing, summoning every ounce of calm she had left. She refused to arrive looking broken. If anything, she wanted to appear composed, poised, almost regal. For too long, she had played the patient wife, offering forgiveness and endless second chances. Tonight would be different. Beside her in the sleek Bentley, Marcus Bennett asked quietly, "Are you certain you want to do this? Facing Adrian in front of everyone won't be easy." Lila straightened her spine, folding her hands protectively over her rounded belly. "I have to. I can't let him flaunt this affair without any consequences. If I hide, he wins. I'm done watching my life happen from the sidelines." From her clutch, she pulled out a thick manila envelope, her secret weapon, assembled piece by piece over the last month. When her suspicions about Adrian's infidelity began to feel undeniable, she had hired a private investigator. What came back had stunned her. Not only proof of his affair with Juliet, but pages of damning evidence, shady transactions, undisclosed shell companies, and suspicious offshore accounts. Adrian was walking a razor's edge with the law. She didn't plan to destroy him, at least not yet. But he needed to know she wasn't a fool. If Adrian imagined he could toss her aside quietly later, he was in for the shock of his life. This file was her insurance policy, for herself and for their unborn child. Marcus glanced at the thick file, recognizing the official seals and financial statements peeking through the folder. His face tightened with worry. This is serious. If the SEC or the FBI ever got wind of this. Lila pressed her lips together. "I know, but it's the only leverage I have. I won't go public unless he pushes me too far. Tonight, he's going to learn I'm not helpless." Marcus nodded, a mixture of respect and concern in his eyes. He had once seen Adrian as a brilliant protégé, a force who might change the industry for good. Now, that same man teetered on the edge of scandal, and maybe worse. Yet Marcus's loyalty had shifted long ago, to Lila and the innocent life she carried. Deep down, he clung to the slim hope that tonight's confrontation might shake some decency back into Adrian's hollow heart. As Marcus's Bentley pulled up to the Astoria Grand Hotel's grand entrance, camera flashes popped like fireworks. Paparazzi who'd expected celebrities and influencers froze mid-shot, their lenses zeroing in on Marcus Bennett stepping out beside Adrian's very pregnant wife. The collective gasp from the crowd said it all. Something explosive was about to unfold. Microphones extended. Cameras flashed. Reporters barked questions into the chilly night air. Lila drew one final deep breath, placed her hand in Marcus's, and let him guide her up the red carpet. She could feel the tension coiled around every curious gaze as they entered the hotel lobby. Heads turned, murmurs rippled. Her heart pounded like a drum, but her eyes stayed locked forward, steady with purpose. Soon she would stand toe-to-toe with Adrian and his mistress, and when that moment came, she would not break. She carried the truth and a plan to take back her dignity. Marcus Bennett was a name that made boardrooms go silent. A decade ago, his firm, Bennett Capital, had rattled the tech world, backing startups that reshaped online commerce and artificial intelligence. His uncanny ability to spot gold beneath the rubble made him a legend. But after a devastating tragedy, his younger sister's fatal car accident, he disappeared from the limelight, choosing instead to pour his wealth into quiet philanthropy in forgotten corners of the world. No one expected to see him tonight at the Tomorrow's Promise Gala, least of all as the guardian of Lila Walsh. Whispers snaked through the crowd. Were he and Lila romantically involved? Was this the birth of some powerful corporate alliance? Others remembered that Marcus had once been Adrian's mentor, a detail that only fanned the flames of speculation. Inside the ballroom, Marcus commanded attention without saying a word. Tall, lean, and immaculately dressed, his calm confidence made Adrian's flashy swagger look cheap in comparison. Where Adrian flaunted his new money boldness, Marcus carried himself with old-school composure and authority. He guided Lila through the sea of cameras and questions, ignoring every microphone thrust in his face, his attention locked on her and her alone. Lila, despite the buzzing storm of stares and hushed gossip, felt a calm steadiness radiate from him. The nervous knots in her stomach slowly loosened, replaced by a fierce resolve. Together they looked like an unbreakable force, the betrayed wife, heavily pregnant and unyielding, shielded by a man too powerful to dismiss. Across the ballroom, Adrian and Juliet were laughing politely with Robert Grant and a circle of high-stakes investors when Adrian's eyes caught the sight that stole the breath from his lungs. He froze for a split second, his practiced grin flickering. Panic flashed behind his eyes before he forced the smile back into place. But Juliet felt the sudden tension in the way he squeezed her elbow. "Marcus is here," Adrian hissed, voice tight and low. "Why the hell would he?" Juliet arched an eyebrow. "Who is he to you?" "My old mentor," Adrian muttered, teeth clenched. "And that's my wife." With him. Across the room, Marcus met Adrian's startled gaze and gave a polite nod. Yet the cool undertone of disappointment was unmistakable. Beside him, Lila lifted her chin, defiance burning in her eyes as she prepared to face the man who thought she would stay silent. Juliet understood in an instant. If Marcus Bennett was involved, this was far more than an angry wife's public stunt. Adrian drew a shaky breath, snapping out of his daze. He slid a possessive hand around Juliet's waist and, feigning calm he didn't feel, steered her toward the approaching pair. A hush swept through the ballroom as eyes turned, the air vibrating with scandal and suspense. The four of them stood within arm's reach, an invisible storm crackling between them. Adrian, his smile pulled painfully tight, spoke first. "Well, Lila, I didn't expect to see you tonight." His eyes flicked uneasily to Marcus, then back to her. "And you've brought a very distinguished companion." Lila's expression was calm, ice-cold calm. "Hello, Adrian. I hope I'm not interrupting your big night." Beside her, Marcus gave the faintest nod, a silent promise that he was here, no matter how this ended. And just like that, the stage was set for a confrontation that would rattle the foundation of Adrian's carefully polished world. All around them, the glittering guests turned into a silent audience, watching as the scandal unfolded like a live drama. Husband and pregnant wife, mistress and mentor, each pair standing their ground. In the background, the Gala's string quartet played on, the elegant notes clashing awkwardly with the tension suffocating the ballroom. Lila's heart hammered in her chest as she locked eyes with Adrian. Memories she once cherished, late nights by the fireplace, his vows on their wedding day, the tearful joy when they first learned she was pregnant, flooded her mind in an instant. But the man staring back at her now looked more like a stranger than her once loving husband. Adrian forced a shallow grin. "You look stunning, Lila. I'm just surprised you're here. I thought you were resting at home." His attempt at casual charm made her stomach twist in disgust. Juliet, still clinging to his arm, piped up in her syrupy voice. "Adrian invited me to help host tonight. It's such an important evening for the Tomorrow's Promise Foundation, and I care deeply about giving back." The sugar-coated lie sent heat racing up Lila's spine. She clenched her fists until her nails dug into her skin, but kept her tone cool and lethal. "How generous of you, Juliet. I'm sure your passion for Adrian's interests goes far beyond charity work." A ripple of shocked murmurs spread through the circle of eavesdroppers. Juliet stiffened, her smile cracking as her eyes flared in warning. Adrian's polite mask fell away, replaced by a dark glare. But if he thought Lila would shrink back, he was gravely mistaken. She turned her gaze directly on him. I came here tonight because I deserve to see exactly who you're flaunting, and to remind you that neither I nor our child will be brushed aside like a mistake. Next to her, Marcus laid a steadying hand on her arm. His voice, calm yet edged with steel, cut through the thick air. Adrian, I'm disappointed in you. This petty public spectacle, this is not the man I once mentored. It's beneath you, and it's an insult to everything you claim to stand for. Adrian's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. Marcus's words pierced something buried deep, old guilt, fleeting and inconvenient. But then his eyes darted to the surrounding faces and flashing phones. Keeping up his image mattered more than any apology. We should finish this conversation somewhere private, Adrian snapped under his breath. Lila? Marcus? Outside. Now. Without waiting for a reply, he tugged Juliet along, and the onlookers parted in a hush, making way as the four of them strode toward the grand terrace doors. The main ballroom quieted, but whispered speculations and frantic texts zipped through the crowd like electricity. Outside, the city's skyline glittered against the night, mocking the storm brewing among them. A cool breeze drifted across the terrace, but it did nothing to cut through the raw tension ready to erupt in the dark. Adrian turned sharply on Lila, frustration twisting his words. Why drag Marcus here? Why humiliate me like this, out in public? Lila's eyes shone with unshed tears, but her voice cut through the night like a blade. Humiliate you? You're the one parading your mistress around while I'm carrying your child. Did you really think I'd stay silent forever? Juliet started to protest, but Marcus silenced her with a single, cold stare. He turned to Adrian, his tone low but commanding. If you have any respect left for Lila at all, you'll end this circus with a shred of dignity. For one fleeting moment, Adrian's shoulders slumped, and real regret flickered across his face, but Juliet tightened her grip on his arm, a living reminder of the choices he'd made. Trapped between guilt and ego, Adrian stood at a crossroads with the entire city, and most importantly Lila, watching to see who he really was. In the end, the confrontation on the terrace was mercifully short. Juliet played the part of the wounded lover, but it was clear to everyone that her outrage had less to do with heartbreak and more with watching her carefully laid ambitions slip through her fingers. Every sharp word, every prying eye pressed into Lila's skin like splinters, but she refused to bend, even as her throat burned with unspoken sobs. Lila, fighting back the tears stinging her eyes, turned away, refusing to let Juliet see even a shred of her hurt. Marcus gently guided her away from the terrace, shielding her from the worst of the scandal. Together, they stepped back into the ballroom, straight-backed under the weight of hundreds of curious eyes and whispered questions. Lila's heart roared in her chest, a storm of fury, grief, and a raw resolve she hadn't realized she possessed until tonight. She clutched Marcus's arm, grateful beyond words for the unwavering calm he lent her. In that moment, she knew she would never again be a woman defined by someone else's betrayal. Outside on the terrace, Adrian and Juliet stood in the tense silence they had created. Juliet's voice dripped venom as she hissed, "That was mortifying. How could you not tell me your wife would show up? Pregnant, no less, and with Marcus Bennett, of all people?" Adrian dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. "I had no idea Lila was coming. Believe me, this wasn't my plan." He shot her a glare, the weight of his reckless choices crashing down on him. "And don't forget, you were the one so eager to be seen tonight. Well, this is what it got us." Juliet's eyes narrowed into slits. "So now it's my fault? Did you see the way Marcus looked at you? He could destroy you, and if he digs into your finances, your little empire won't survive the week." A flicker of dread darted through Adrian's eyes. Juliet was right, and for the first time all night, the magnitude of what he stood to lose truly hit him. If Marcus chose to turn his considerable influence against him, the fallout could be catastrophic. Determined to salvage what he could, Adrian straightened his suit and muttered, "Let's not cause more of a scene. We'll finish our duties here and talk privately about what comes next." Inside, the gala continued without missing a beat. The MC took the stage, urging donors to pledge their support for the foundation. Applause and cheers echoed as eye-popping donations lit up a giant digital screen. But behind the glittering display of charity, The real headline of the night thrived in hushed whispers and glowing phone screens. Social media was ablaze with photos of Lila arriving arm in arm with Marcus. Feeds flooded with headlines like CEO Marcus Bennett shields pregnant wife from Millionaire's betrayal and scandal at tomorrow's promised Gala. Near the refreshment tables, Marcus found a quiet corner for Lila to rest. A few well-meaning acquaintances offered sympathetic nods, but most onlookers kept their distance, wary of becoming collateral gossip. Lila accepted a glass of water from a passing waiter, but barely sipped it. Despite the heat of the crowded ballroom, she felt chilled to the bone. Marcus leaned close enough that only she could hear him. "I'm proud of you for standing your ground, but I'm concerned. This stress isn't good for you or the baby. Maybe we should slip out early?" Lila hesitated. She was exhausted, emotionally scraped raw, but part of her rebelled at the thought of appearing defeated. "No, I need him to see I won't just disappear. I'll stay until the main announcements wrap up." Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. He respected her resolve, and privately, he admired her more than ever. A faint pang of guilt tugged at him. After all, he had once helped shape Adrian's rise, never dreaming that success would twist him this way. Now, Marcus silently vowed to be Lila's shield, no matter what storms Adrian might try to unleash. As the gala carried on, a quiet current of suspense pulsed through the guests. Whispers circled. Would Lila leave in tears or stand unshaken to the end? Would Adrian's reputation crumble under the weight of scandal, or would money and charm protect him once again? Only time, and perhaps Marcus Bennett's next move, would decide. In the days after the gala, rumors swirled like wildfire. Tabloids splashed dramatic headlines: Billionaire mentor versus protege showdown, while high society gossip columns dripped with anonymous quotes detailing Adrian's brazen display with Juliet. Lila, though humiliated by the spectacle, found comfort in an unexpected wave of support. Messages from old friends and total strangers, many sharing stories of betrayal and resilience. Among the chaos, a circle of unexpected allies closed ranks around her. Natalie Harris, her childhood friend and trusted legal advisor at Adrian's firm, stepped up first. After her urgent warning call, Natalie doubled down, helping Lila secure consultations with the best divorce lawyers in the city and gather airtight evidence of Adrian's shady financial dealings. If a courtroom battle came, Lila would be ready. Then there was Marianne DuPont, an elegant philanthropist and once a mentor to Lila in her early PR days. Outraged by Adrian's blatant disrespect, Marianne leveraged her vast network to rally public sympathy. Whenever Adrian tried to paint Lila as unstable or bitter, he ran into silent but immovable walls of disapproval from the city's elite. But perhaps the most surprising ally turned out to be Robert Grant. The CEO who had once counted himself among Adrian's closest confidants, Robert Grant, found himself deeply shaken after witnessing Adrian's public humiliation of Lila. He reached out to Marcus directly, voicing his disbelief at Adrian's reckless behavior and quietly offering to connect Lila with discreet financial advisors. These experts could comb through Adrian's tangled assets, ensuring Lila's rights were fully protected if she chose to pursue separation. For Lila, this sudden wave of support felt almost surreal. She had braced herself to be alone, vulnerable, and powerless during her pregnancy. Now, she found herself surrounded by an unexpected but fierce network of friends and allies. It didn't take her long to realize her position was far stronger than Adrian had ever imagined. Sometimes, late at night, she would lie awake in her quiet bedroom, one hand on her belly, the other clutching her phone, reading messages of encouragement from people she never thought would stand with her. With each word, her fear shrank just a little more. Meanwhile, Marcus kept in regular contact. He visited Lila at her estate, checking on her emotional state and the well-being of her unborn child. His steady presence became an anchor she clung to more than she ever admitted out loud. Of course, whispers trailed them wherever they went. Gossip columns speculated about a budding romance, painting Marcus as the gallant billionaire hero sweeping a betrayed wife off her feet. But Lila paid no mind to the rumors. She knew his intentions were pure, protective, supportive, and grounded in a moral duty to set right what he'd once helped build. When Marcus sat beside her, he didn't promise to fix her world. He simply reminded her that she didn't have to fight alone anymore. That truth steadied her like nothing else could. Adrian's reaction to this tightening circle around Lila was a toxic mix of fury and paranoia. Juliet stoked the fire daily, warning him that Lila was building an airtight legal case. Panicked, Adrian spent sleepless nights calling lawyers, burying questionable transactions deeper in shell companies, and hiring investigators to sniff out who was leaking his secrets. But the more he scrambled, the less control he seemed to have. Every attempt to reclaim the narrative, lavish public appearances with Juliet, only backfired. Headlines kept circling back to Lila's quiet grace and Marcus's formidable influence. Investors grew skittish, murmuring behind closed doors that Adrian's personal scandal could poison future deals. Behind the scenes, tension coiled tighter by the day. The only real question left was not if Adrian would fall, but when, and who would have the final say when it all came crashing down. For Adrian Walsh, the first undeniable sign that the walls were closing in arrived in a plain envelope embossed with the seal of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Inside was a terse letter requesting documents related to multiple offshore accounts Adrian had foolishly believed were hidden behind enough shell corporations to stay invisible forever. Someone, somewhere, had tipped off the authorities. Adrian just couldn't pinpoint who. In his sleepless haze, he blamed Marcus, or maybe even Lila's loyal friend Natalie. The paranoia devoured his nights, sending him spiraling into frantic phone calls with his legal team, grasping for a way out that never came. As if the SEC probe weren't disastrous enough, his so-called fairy tale with Juliet was falling apart at the seams. She had never signed up for a man on the verge of indictment, whose fortune could vanish overnight if the allegations stuck. She began skipping their dinners, citing urgent business meetings that reeked of convenient excuses. Their once magnetic affair turned brittle and mean, each accusing the other of betrayal. Juliet made veiled threats about cutting her losses if Adrian's empire showed signs of collapse. Between the looming legal catastrophe and a mistress slipping from his grasp, the flawless image Adrian had crafted over the years started to crumble. Whispers swirled through his company's corridors, rumors about his erratic tirades, sudden firings of staff he branded as disloyal, last-minute cancellations of board meetings, and an explosive meltdown that sent investors scrambling. Meanwhile, Lila pressed on in silence. With Natalie's meticulous help, she gathered every shred of evidence, documents, texts, photos, proof of Adrian's deceit, both personal and professional. Part of her burned to bring every secret into the light, to force him to answer for the heartbreak he'd inflicted. But another part still remembered the man she had once loved. She knew if she destroyed him completely, their child would suffer the fallout too, deserving better than a father disgraced and imprisoned. Yet she wouldn't sacrifice herself or her child for his redemption. Lila ordered her lawyers to finalize a sealed divorce petition. She only needed to say the word. If Adrian refused a fair settlement, she would protect her baby's future, no matter how hard she had to fight. Marcus, for his part, quietly wove a shield around her. Using his vast network of loyal investigators, he unearthed more hidden truths. Undeclared income, suspicious trades, whispers of bribery in overseas markets. Brick by brick, he built an unshakable wall around Lila's interests. Marcus never pushed her toward vengeance. He believed in consequences, not cruelty, justice done properly, not fueled by hate. Word of Adrian's unraveling spread like wildfire. Board members began whispering about his erratic state, floating the possibility that a leadership change might be the only way to salvage the company's public image. And for Adrian Walsh, that was the ultimate nightmare. Power slipping from his grasp, the lie of control stripped away, and a wife he could no longer command. She had once seemed so loyal, so perfectly accommodating, until she wasn't. Late one night, Juliet quietly packed her designer luggage and slipped out of Adrian's penthouse, leaving behind only a curt, handwritten note. She claimed she couldn't risk sinking alongside a man whose kingdom was crumbling by the day. When Adrian found her absence, a sharp twist of betrayal cut through him, mixed with a strange, fleeting relief. At least that complication was gone. But she left him to stand alone in the wreckage he had created. In his cavernous, eerily silent penthouse, the city's skyline glittered mockingly, a reminder of how high he'd flown and how far he was about to fall. The empire he'd built on grit, charm, and half-truths was teetering, and the woman he had underestimated most, Lila, had become the catalyst for his unraveling. Whether he blamed her or himself shifted by the hour. Juliet Rivers may have vanished from Adrian's apartment, but it wasn't surrender. It was strategy. In a plush suite at the Hallion Hotel, she lounged in silk robes, sipping champagne while skimming articles chronicling Adrian's spiral into scandal. Her mind buzzed with plans. She had always enjoyed the thrill of being draped on the arm of a powerful man, but she never intended to drown when his ship went down. Between each headline, she replayed the last conversation with Adrian, his cold frustration, her carefully veiled contempt. Loyalty was never in her nature, she reminded herself. Only survival. Juliet's entire way of life hinged on knowing when to pivot. As Adrian's future grew shakier, she slipped away, careful to leave behind no evidence that could implicate her. Every luxury handbag, every diamond trinket he'd given her, locked in a safe deposit box under a fake name. She knew how fast the government could seize assets when the law came knocking. While Adrian fought a losing battle to patch the cracks in his fortune, Juliet was already mapping her next move. Her little black book overflowed with names. Tycoons, heirs, royals scattered across continents, any one of whom might find her allure and strategic mind useful. Yet one man lingered at the edges of her thoughts more than she liked to admit. Marcus Bennett. That night at the Gala, the way he'd stared her down, utterly unfazed by her beauty or her sly charm, had rattled her. Most men tripped over themselves for a second glance. Marcus hadn't even blinked. His confidence, his old money polish, his quiet authority, he was the kind of man who usually steered clear of women like her. And that infuriated her more than she'd ever confess. To Juliet, everyone had a weakness. Marcus's indifference was an itch she couldn't stop scratching. But Juliet had never liked being told what she couldn't have. So she set her sights on him, or at least the idea of him, as her next potential stepping stone. Through a discreet contact at Bennett Capital, she arranged for a convenient, accidental meeting at an exclusive art auction downtown. Draped in a sleek black dress, she drifted among priceless canvases, wearing the perfect mask of cultured grace. When Marcus arrived, though, he barely glanced her way. He was there on business, quietly bidding on a series of paintings to benefit an urban youth program. Juliet's coy smiles went unnoticed. If he was aware of her at all, he gave no sign. And for the first time in a long time, Juliet Rivers felt her carefully sharpened weapon, her beauty, bounce harmlessly off an armor she didn't yet know how to crack. Juliet tried her best to coax conversation out of Marcus, weaving light chatter between auction bids. But Marcus remained impeccably polite and unmistakably cold. He knew exactly who she was and exactly how much pain she'd helped inflict on Lila. Undeterred, Juliet decided to play her final card, the mask of sincerity. After Marcus closed his winning bid on a watercolor, she cornered him near a marble column and spoke in a hushed, earnest tone. "I never meant to hurt Lila. Adrian told me their marriage was over. He said she was a social climber, just milking his name for status and money." Marcus's steel blue eyes flicked over her with a cool, almost bored contempt. "So you believe that? Or did you simply choose to believe what suited your ambition?" Color rose sharply in Juliet's cheeks. "I might have been naive, yes, but I'm not the villain everyone says I am. I genuinely care about charity work. Maybe you and I could." Marcus cut her off with a dismissive shake of his head. "If you truly want to undo a fraction of the damage you've caused, start by apologizing to Lila. And then disappear from her life for good." He pivoted on his polished shoe and walked away, leaving Juliet frozen, mouth half open, her carefully rehearsed charm stripped bare by blunt rejection. For the first time in years, she realized that Marcus Bennett wasn't just immune to her allure, he found it repulsive. Standing alone amid murmurs and champagne flutes, Juliet felt something foreign coiling in her chest. Doubt. She still had her cunning, her looks, her Rolodex of powerful men, but in a world guarded by men like Marcus, her brand of opportunism might be reaching its expiration date. Meanwhile, the SEC probe intensified. Adrian faced the mounting horror that an indictment might be days away if more damning evidence surfaced. Panic pushed him to make a last, desperate gamble. He reached out to Marcus Bennett. Maybe, Adrian told himself, the mentor he'd once admired, would help him patch this up, or at least keep certain truths buried. Swallowing what pride he had left, Adrian dialed the number and requested a meeting. Marcus agreed. They sat across from each other in a sleek glass-walled conference room at an exclusive private club downtown. Adrian arrived projecting a brittle confidence, but the deep shadows under his eyes betrayed how badly he was unraveling. Marcus sat waiting, hands clasped on the polished mahogany table, his expression a mask that revealed nothing. After a strained silence, Adrian forced a smile. "I appreciate you taking the time to see me." Marcus gave a stiff nod. "You said it was urgent." "I'm listening." Adrian cleared his throat, voice catching. "Look, I know you disapprove of everything that happened with Lila. And yes, I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to lose everything. You and I, we have a history." "You once called me your protégé," Adrian said, desperation bleeding through the cracks in his forced calm. Marcus's eyes didn't flinch. "That was before you threw away basic ethics and common decency." A flicker of anger darkened Adrian's expression, but he forced it down, lowering his tone into something pleading. "I need your help. You have contacts within the regulatory circles. If you could just speak to someone, buy me time, I can fix this. Make it right, anything you want. Just don't let them bury me alive. I have a child on the way." Marcus studied him, the weight of disappointment and faint pity battling in his eyes. His memories of Adrian stretched from a bright, hungry young man to this fractured version begging for rescue. "Do you even understand what you've done to Lila? To your child?" Marcus said evenly. "You flaunted another woman in public while your wife carried your future." Adrian's eyes fell. His posture crumbled. "Lila was always too good for me. I see that now. But please, Marcus, you know how this game works. If the SEC presses charges, my name is ruined. I won't be able to give my child the life I promised them." Marcus exhaled slowly. "I can reach out quietly. It may buy you time to disclose everything about your offshore mess. But listen to me carefully. This is not a promise to wipe your slate clean. The law is the law. If you hold anything back or try to game the system again, you're on your own. Understood?" Adrian's voice cracked as he nodded. Yes, I'll cooperate, I swear." Marcus leaned back, and for a heartbeat the guarded stoicism faded into a glimpse of sadness. "You also owe Lila an apology, and you will come to a fair agreement for her and the baby. If you don't, if you try to cut corners, I will make sure every piece of evidence hits every regulatory desk in the country, and you know I can." The threat sank into Adrian's bones like a cold knife, but he also knew it was the only lifeline left. "I will. Thank you, Marcus. I won't forget this." Marcus rose, signaling the end of the conversation. "Don't betray that promise." As Adrian stepped out into the night, a cocktail of relief and dread tangled in his chest. He understood, with sickening clarity, that the road ahead demanded him to crawl back every scrap of honor he'd shredded, by owning every lie and making peace with Lila, if she would even listen. For a man who had spent his entire life equating vulnerability with weakness, the cost of survival was now his pride. In the turbulent weeks that followed, Adrian launched himself into damage control. Marcus's discreet outreach bought him some goodwill, but the SEC's investigation didn't simply vanish. Voluntary disclosures, back-channel cooperation, and restitution payments to wronged parties gave Adrian a sliver of breathing space and allowed him to avoid the nightmare of a full criminal trial. Still, the mountain of fines and the irreparable smear on his name weighed heavy. The empire he once flaunted would never shine the same way again, but for the first time, maybe Adrian Walsh understood what truly mattered beyond the spotlight. Shareholders demanded a new course, and Adrian was forced to resign as CEO of the very company he had once dragged from obscurity into the spotlight. The board wasted no time. They appointed an interim CEO, a seasoned executive respected for his calm steadiness, someone the rattled investors trusted to clean up the mess. Adrian was demoted to an advisory role, purely symbolic, stripped of any real power. The media pounced on his downfall. Headlines that once praised him as a self-made trailblazer now rebranded him a cautionary tale of arrogance undone by scandal. Every news cycle dredged up the affair, turning Adrian Walsh into a prime example of hubris in the age of instant headlines. Lila watched this unfold with a quiet, complicated ache. She couldn't take satisfaction in seeing him reduced like this, because beneath the betrayal, she still remembered the man she once loved. The one who wove flowers into her hair on sleepy Sundays. But love couldn't erase the heartbreak or the consequences. Accountability had to stand. Sometimes she caught herself wondering if, somewhere deep down, Adrian felt the crushing regret she'd longed to see in his eyes. But she forced herself to let that thought drift away. She had a child to protect now. Their marriage was beyond saving, but for the sake of their unborn child, Lila chose cautious cooperation. Her attorneys filed for divorce, but presented a settlement that secured full financial support for their baby, without stripping Adrian of all dignity. She demanded full custody, but left the door open for Adrian to have regular visits, so long as he proved himself worthy. For weeks, Adrian resisted, suspicious that it was a ploy to ruin him further. But when no hidden trap appeared, when he saw that Lila meant it, he signed. The ink barely dry, he felt the weight of everything he'd lost settle deep in his chest. He had traded the real treasures in his life for a fleeting thrill. Juliet's life veered sharply too. After Marcus's icy rejection, she flirted with the idea of wooing new wealthy prospects. But her reputation, stained by the scandal, closed more doors than it opened. In a bid to salvage her social standing, she leaned on the same charity circles she once scoffed at. She launched a modest literacy foundation for underprivileged children, a PR stunt to some, but a rebrand nonetheless. It earned her mild sympathy and a flicker of relevance, but the commanding presence she once wielded beside Adrian never returned. At night, alone in her hotel suite, Juliet sometimes stared at her reflection and hated how small she suddenly felt. No headlines, no billionaire at her side, just the echo of her own ambition turning cold. As for Marcus Bennett, his steady role as Lila's shield slowly evolved into something richer. It started as mutual respect and shared outrage at Adrian's betrayal, but it deepened into late-night talks, co-dreaming about better schools, community grants, and a fairer city. Lila came to cherish Marcus's quiet integrity. Marcus admired her quiet courage. Over time, she learned the depth behind Marcus's philanthropy. A sister gone too soon, a grief he turned into tireless compassion for those who couldn't fight for themselves. When Lila finally gave birth to her daughter, Grace Walsh, Marcus was among the first to visit her in the hospital, a silent promise that whatever her future held, she would never face it alone. He arrived at the hospital with a simple bouquet of lilies, a humble gesture compared to the lavish floral arrangements sent by well-wishers. Lila was unexpectedly touched. In that small, hushed hospital room, she and Marcus stood by her side as Adrian held his daughter for the first time. Tiny Grace Walsh, wide-eyed and impossibly innocent, carried Adrian's bloodline, but it was Lila's quiet strength that would shape her future. As she gazed at her baby's delicate face, Lila felt the full weight of her new reality. Protector, guide, and the final guardian of what truly mattered. In the months that followed, Adrian tried, awkwardly, clumsily, to show he could be better, at least as a father. His early visits with Grace were always supervised. He'd cradle the infant with unsteady arms, tears threatening to spill. Whether those tears came from raw regret or the beginnings of genuine love, Lila couldn't be sure, but she chose to let him try. He never begged for a second chance at their marriage. Maybe he finally understood that door was locked forever. Instead, he focused on proving he could be a stable presence in Grace's life. Some days were easier than others. At Marcus's suggestion, Adrian began therapy, a step that startled even him. In those sessions, he unearthed buried wounds from a childhood spent chasing approval. He confronted how that relentless hunger for validation had blinded him to the trail of emotional wreckage he left behind, especially with Lila. It was slow, humbling work, but hints of progress appeared. Shunned by many in the corporate elite, Adrian found scattered opportunities among smaller ventures willing to tap into his expertise. He accepted a consulting role with a modest tech startup in Seattle, commuting back to visit Grace on weekends, ever the fallen king trying to salvage something real. Lila, meanwhile, flourished in her freedom. With no shadow hanging over her, she leaned into her passion projects. Alongside Marianne DuPont, she launched Heart to Heart, a nonprofit offering financial aid and counseling to expectant mothers abandoned or trapped in abusive homes. The mission resonated deeply with her own journey. Donations poured in, amplified by endorsements from celebrities and Marcus Bennett's vast philanthropic network. Inevitably, whispers swirled. Gossip blogs speculated breathlessly about the romance blossoming between the dignified billionaire and the radiant young mother. For a long time, Lila ignored the chatter, partly because her own feelings were still unfurling in quiet, uncertain ways. Marcus had become her trusted friend first, a rock she could lean on, a sounding board for her hopes. But somewhere amid the long meetings, the shared dreams for a better community, a different spark took root. It wasn't reckless or scandalous. It was gentle, grounded in admiration and trust, a bond neither of them could deny for much longer. It revealed itself on a crisp autumn afternoon, months after Grace's birth. Marcus had invited Lila to tour a newly opened community center he funded in an underserved neighborhood. As they strolled the freshly painted hallways, talking about plans for expanded daycare rooms and family counseling offices, something shifted, quiet but certain, in the space between them. Their hands brushed by accident, and Lila looked up to find a warmth in Marcus's eyes that mirrored her own, cautious but blooming affection. In that quiet, unspoken second, they both acknowledged it. Something real was beginning. They didn't rush it. Both understood Lila was still healing from wounds Adrian's betrayals had carved deep. Marcus was patient, letting her steer the pace, never pushing. Sometimes in the quiet moments when he'd touch her hand or brush her hair back behind her ear, she felt the old ache try to rise. But Marcus's calm presence turned the ache into something softer, something almost hopeful. Their first official date was sweetly unremarkable. A cozy dinner at a small Italian bistro tucked away from the city's polished crowds. Over plates of fresh pasta and glasses of modest wine, they spoke for hours, discovering how much they shared. A craving for genuine connections, a life free from the suffocating shine of empty wealth. Through every step forward, Lila stayed focused on Grace. She was determined to raise her daughter wrapped in love, not scandal. And to her surprise, Adrian, against all odds, sometimes showed he could be sincere. One morning, he sent a message. "Thank you for letting me be in Grace's life. I promise I won't fail her the way I failed you." The words tugged at Lila's heart. Bittersweet reminders of what might have been. She read his message twice, tears threatening, but she wiped them away before Grace could see. Regret was useless now. The future was what mattered. In time, the public lost interest. New scandals and celebrity dramas stole the headlines. Lila's story faded into a footnote, the betrayed wife who found her voice and walked away stronger. But in private, her life became something far richer than any headline, a testament to compassion, quiet strength, and the kind of hope that rebuilds piece by piece. The last echoes of Adrian's downfall settled like dust, each player left with lessons carved into bone. Juliet learned that charm and opportunism crumble when they crash against an unyielding moral compass like Marcus's. Adrian learned that success built on betrayal is destined to collapse under its own lies. And Lila, she found a voice she'd never lose again, a promise to never stand in anyone's shadow but her own. Years passed gently. Marcus's presence beside her deepened from trusted confidant to beloved partner. When Grace toddled her first unsteady steps across the living room, Marcus was there, cheering alongside Lila. He never tried to replace Adrian as Grace's father. Adrian, humbled, kept his role, visiting when he could. But Marcus brought a quiet, steady warmth and gentle guidance that Grace soaked up without question. Sometimes, as she watched Grace curled in Marcus's lap, giggling at one of his gentle jokes, Lila would whisper a silent thank you to whatever twist of fate had brought him back into her life. At neighborhood events, the three adults stood side by side, proof that grace and forgiveness can coexist with consequence. Adrian, stripped of arrogance, even came to value Marcus's place in their new family balance, knowing Lila and Grace were safe and cared for. And then one evening, Marcus asked Lila to marry him. No reporters, no lavish gala. Just a simple candlelit dinner at his estate, Grace asleep upstairs in her nursery. Marcus rose, then lowered to one knee, holding out a modest but meaningful ring. Tears brimmed in Lila's eyes, tears for all the pain, all the strength, all the second chances she never thought she'd get. She looked at the man who had offered her nothing but quiet loyalty and an unwavering heart. And softly, without a trace of fear left in her voice, she said. He arrived at the hospital with a simple bouquet of lilies, modest compared to the extravagant floral displays from others, yet somehow more meaningful. Lila was unexpectedly moved by the gesture. In that quiet hospital room, Marcus stood beside her while Adrian cradled his newborn daughter for the very first time. Tiny Grace Walsh, bright-eyed, small fists clenched around her blanket, carried Adrian's blood, but it was Lila's unwavering spirit that would shape the life ahead. As she traced her baby's features, she felt the full weight of her new role: protector, teacher, and the final line between her child and the world's cruelty. In the months that followed, Adrian tried, sometimes clumsily, to prove he could be a father worth knowing. At first, his visits with Grace were supervised. He'd hold her awkwardly, tears threatening to slip free. Whether those tears were true remorse or just guilt, Lila couldn't fully say. Still, she gave him the space to try. He never once begged her to take him back. Perhaps he'd finally accepted that part of their story was over forever. Instead, he channeled what strength he had left into being present for Grace. Some days were smoother than others. On Marcus's gentle urging, Adrian even started therapy, an unexpected move that cracked open years of unspoken wounds. In those sessions, he dug deep into the childhood insecurities that fed his ruthless ambition. He faced the bitter truth that his hunger for validation blinded him to the pain he'd caused, especially to Lila. It was grueling, imperfect work, but change came in small, undeniable ways. No longer welcome in the boardrooms that once worshipped him, Adrian found modest redemption, advising fledgling ventures that still valued his insights. He took a consulting post with a small tech startup in Seattle, flying back to see Grace every other weekend. Still a fallen king, but one learning how to be something better. Lila, meanwhile, blossomed. Freed from the weight of betrayal and half-truths, she poured herself into her purpose. With Marianne DuPont by her side, she launched Heart to Heart, a nonprofit providing financial aid and emotional counseling to pregnant women left behind or trapped in toxic homes. It echoed her own journey, and the community rallied to it. Donations surged, bolstered by celebrity endorsements and Marcus Bennett's quiet but formidable influence. Of course, whispers swirled like wind through glass towers. Gossip columns speculated wildly about a romance between the graceful, newly single mother and the city's most private billionaire. Lila paid the rumors little mind. Her feelings were still untangling themselves from old wounds and new hopes. Marcus was first her confidant, her safe harbor. He listened to her fears without judgment, dreamed up outreach programs with her at midnight, made her feel heard in a way no one else ever had. Somewhere between board meetings and community dinners, another spark took root, not born of scandal, but built slowly on trust and an unshakable bond neither could ignore much longer. It surfaced gently on a brisk autumn afternoon, months after Grace's first cries filled that hospital room. Marcus invited Lila to tour a brand-new community center he had funded in one of the city's overlooked corners. They walked the spotless halls together, voices low as they planned future expansions, new daycare rooms, therapy offices, family resource wings. Somewhere between one empty room and the next, their shoulders brushed. Lila looked up, and in Marcus's eyes, she saw the same warmth that had been waiting for her all along. So the story is over. Our wonderful friends, are you still here with me at this late hour? If you are, then I know this tale must have touched something deep in your heart, just as it did in mine. Maybe you, too, have loved someone who didn't protect your trust the way they promised. Or maybe you've stood alone in a storm, thinking you'd break, but somehow you didn't. What Lila's journey reminds us is something many of us forget in the chaos of heartbreak and betrayal. You can lose everything you thought you needed and still find a stronger, kinder version of yourself on the other side. Pain can crack you open, but it can also let the light pour in. In the words of Rumi, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Lila walked through betrayal, humiliation, fear. Yet in every moment she chose not to be defined by what broke her, but by what she would rebuild. She reminds us that dignity isn't about pretending to be unhurt, it's about standing up anyway, even when your knees shake. She teaches us that grace is not weakness, it is a quiet, unshakable strength that says, "This storm does not own me." Maybe tonight as you listen, you're carrying your own storm. Maybe someone made you doubt your worth, or life has left you feeling small and unseen. If so, please hold this close. Your pain does not make you unlovable, it makes you real. And real people like Lila heal and rise, sometimes slowly, sometimes with tears, but always stronger. So if this story gave you even a drop of hope or a reason to believe in fresh starts, please like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to this channel. Here, you are never alone. You are part of a circle that knows healing is messy, but you are worth every beautiful, broken, brave piece of it. Keep going, friend. We're with you.